Hello again everybody and welcome to Tim Turan's Baking Band, and today, episode number 5, we are going to be making that classic Italian bread, focaccia. Now there's lots of different ways of doing it, all of them involve slight different variations of proving time and olive oil amounts and rosemary and garlics and other ingredients. I'm going to show you how to make the classic rosemary focaccia that I have gleaned over the years from many different recipes to come up with my own version of it, which I believe is one of the best. And my little USP is fresh rosemary from the garden. I also have fresh rosemary here today holding the camera.
Hi.
And this is fresh rosemary from the garden. Right, and what we're going to do is we're going to fine chop this rosemary almost to dust, or like flour consistency, and this is my own little take on it. I tried it as an experiment 3-4 years ago and it worked an absolute dream. So the first thing really is to separate the individual fronds. You don't want any of the stalk or the bark because that stuff is actually quite tough. So it's just the individual fronds of the rosemary. So it's a bit of a pain, or a ball ache, or as one of Adam Franklin's friends saw it written down, the word balache, because it looks like B-A-L-L-A-C-H-E, looks like a French word. It's actually ball ache, which is what this is, a bit of a ball ache. So I am now going to chop this down to dust. Okay, I've had enough of that. That's fine enough. Sometimes I go a bit finer, but the idea is that we are going to fold this into the flour so that it proves along with the dough. So here we go. On with the bowl, zero the scales. Today I am using Sainsbury's What's the Difference? Very strong Canadian white bread flour. This is one of my favourites, and I bought quite a lot of this about 3 or 4 weeks ago, probably even a bit longer, before we went into lockdown. So I've still got about 5 or 6 of these in the larder. So here we go, 500 grams. Very, very high protein count. Around about 15 or 16 grams per 100 grams of flour protein count, so very high. Makes wonderful elastic dough. Let's just get the measurements right. There's your magic number, 500 grams. Zero the scales. Once again, fine salt. 11 grams. In fact, I'm going to make this 10 grams. We'll make this 10 grams because you are going to be using some Malden sea salt later to dress the bread before baking. Shake that down. Next, 340 millilitres of warm water, slightly more than the regular bloomer loaf, because it's a slightly wetter dough. So we shall get my favourite fresh yeast. If you're using fast action dried yeast, it will be 7 grams. If you're using fresh yeast, we will be using, let's have a look, let's zero those scales. Good. We will be using 14 grams. I'm actually going to use 15 grams of fresh yeast, and we plop it, crumble it, here we go, into the water. Now you'll have seen this same technique for the bloomer loaf that I did, but for people who are watching this video for the first time won't have seen that. So here we go. 15 grams of very, very fresh yeast. And we're then going to get a whisk and dissolve the yeast into the water. This ensures a very even dispersal of the yeast into the flour. If you've got the if you've got the dried yeast, you can do the same thing. You can dissolve it into the water and you get this lovely, nice even dispersal. Then we add our chopped rosemary. This is very concentrated. When it's chopped down this fine, it's very concentrated indeed. And we'll just give that a quick whiz around like so. Cool. Right. Now, what is focaccia all about? Focaccia is all about olive oil. So, a big fat, very generous 2 tablespoons of olive oil there, and a generous wodge of olive oil also into the bowl, because you're going to kind of wash and roll the dough in the oil when you go and leave it to prove. So I'm going to be using my no knead method, which is 3 3-minute periods of doing nothing and 3 30-second periods of folding and turning. So let's get the dough on the go. So in with the water. Let's just plop the whole lot in. If it's slightly too wet, I'll simply add a bit more flour. If it's slightly too dry, you just add a little bit more water. This looks like it's going to pan out quite nicely. Now you can see the pieces of rosemary. Let's see if we try and get all of that up. Yeah, there we go. Lovely. And of course, always get that soaking or it will turn to concrete in the bowl. Smudge out the olive oil, drop your dough into the middle of it, roll it around in the oil to get it all thoroughly coated, like so. And again, I like to use a palette knife too. There is a big fat slice of bread there just stuck on your fingers, so I just like to clean that off like so. And again, all we're waiting for is for the water to get into the flour. And miraculously, the gluten does develop just by having the water there. So, that looks pretty good to me. So, first off, a quick pull, roll it. Turn it around, pull it a bit, roll it, and we just make sure that all the water gets into the dough, and that's all we're going to do. We're going to leave it for 3 minutes, come back and give it a fold and a turn, and you will see that lumpy mass turn into this lovely smooth mass. So see you in 3 minutes. Okay, 3 minutes have passed. So we are going to stretch, fold and turn. So turn your dough over, stretch, fold it into the middle, turn it, stretch and fold. And we just do this for about 30 seconds, no more. It's not really even kneading, it's just a bit of a stretch and a pull. Slightly wetter than the bloomer dough, but look already, the transformation is fantastic. As the gluten in this incredibly strong flour starts to do its thing. Okay, here we go, looking smooth already. See you in 3 more minutes. Okay, we're coming up for our second stretch and turn. Another 3 minutes have passed. And stretch and turn and look. Oh yes. Look. Amazing, amazing. Let's just keep stretching and turning a bit more, just for 30 seconds or so. God, it's really, really, really developing. Oh, look at that, beautiful. Okay, final 3 minutes. Look at all the rosemary flecked in there, beautiful. Okay, 3 more minutes and we'll be back for the final turn and into the bowl. Okie dokie, right, here's the bowl with a lot of olive oil in, maybe a big fat tablespoon, maybe even more. There's no strict measurements with the olive oil. It is all about the olive oil with focaccia, no matter whose recipes you watch online. I came across a recipe about 5 or 6 years ago, and it was all in Italian. It was an Italian lady making focaccia, and it was just fantastic the amount of olive oil she managed to get into the bread, and the result looked incredible. So I kind of went with that. Then I went with a few other recipes, and a French guy as well. But let's do our final turn. And pull and stretch, and there we go. It is as smooth as satin. Oh, look at that. Amazing transformation. We could have spent the last 10 minutes pulling and bashing and stretching and kneading, and you know, and it's not really necessary. Not really necessary. But there we go. Mop up the olive oil with the bread. With the dough rather. Okay, and into the bowl, and what we're going to do is plop that into the bowl, and we're going to turn it in the oil like so to completely cover it. We're even going to plop a bit more on top, and you want to completely cover the dough in oil like so. Right, I am now going to kitchen roll. This is plenty. There's a fake Spanish guy called Juan Shid that advertises this stuff, and it's very good. Right. Cling film. Or as my Turkish uncle Rupil calls it, killing film. So, there we go. Into the bowl. Should know by now that we do it drum tight. That is going into the conservatory because the temperature has gone up. It's what, April the 5th now, and the temperature is really quite nice and high. So I'm going to put that into the conservatory where it's very warm, and it's going to fluff up, and hopefully it will treble its size. Lots of big fat air holes, which is kind of what we want. So we'll see you when it's proved. About an hour, hour and a half. See you then. I'd say that was 3 times the size, wouldn't you? There we go. That's an hour and a half proof in the conservatory. Look at that. Whoa. Right, this is the tray or the tin we are going to bake it in, and we need to prepare it first of all with a good dose of olive oil, like so, and then we're going to put Malden sea salt, and what you don't want to do is to crush the flakes. So we're just going to plop a few flakes in the bottom there, and it won't dissolve because salt doesn't dissolve in oil very much. There we go, just a little bit. And remember, don't scrunch up the flakes. Okie doke, let's just mooch that around like so. Give it a good old coating. So lots of olive oil. You can almost not have too much olive oil in a focaccia. So I'm just going to make sure that that's all thoroughly coated, which it certainly looks like. Lovely, nice even coating of olive oil. And then a little bit on my hands, I'm just going to do the edges. So grease or oil the edges like so. Plenty olive oil. Good. Right. Here we go. How does that smell? Unbelievable. Right, now there's no knockback with this dough. We're not going to knock it back at all. Because of the olive oil, it's not going to stick very much. So what we want to do is move it around the bowl. Just let it come away like so. Gently, gently. That's the way. How about that? And now, underneath, we're going to stretch it. Try and keep as much air as you can. And don't worry, it's going to go for a second prove, but you want to kind of get it into the corners. Stretch it out, very stretchy dough. There we go, stretch it on out. Make sure it fills those corners like so. Try and get it even. It's very difficult to get it completely even, but then stick your fingers in like so. Look at these bubbles, and then you end up with something that looks like that. Let's just stretch those out. We want it to get right into the corners. Smashing. Okay. Right. Next, the way rosemary grows on the stalks is it has little clusters of there we go, a little cluster, and what you do is you just stick them in like this. There we go, just get clusters of rosemary and stick them into the dough. Okie dokie, nearly there. Plenty of rosemary. There we go, let's get a bit in there. Any bits where there aren't any. So long as you get a bit in every slice. There we go, that'll do. Oh, there's a bit there. Right, there we go. Very nice. This is the trouble, I keep seeing holes where there aren't any now, so we'll just pop a bit there and there. Right, that's it. Okay, next, killing film. Cover it all over, and it is going to sit there now for about another half an hour in this nice warm kitchen, and we'll plop it here next to this decorative cauliflower, which I always think cauliflowers are amazing because they look like atom bomb explosions. Look, it's fantastic. So we'll sit this here for about a half an hour and it'll prove right up again, and then we shall get it into the oven at 220 degrees. I might do 220, might do 210, 200 to 220 degrees. There will be no water involved in the pan. And before we put it in the oven, we'll have some Malden sea salt on top, and then I do a mixture of warm water and olive oil, and you whiz it up and then just pour it over the top. Get your sea salt on into the oven for about a 20-minute bake. So when we get to that point, we'll get to that point. Okay folks, here is our focaccia dough. There you go, and that is after about 40 minutes. As you can see, looking really good. Let's just give it a quick flump, don't want too much. Right, now I I'm going to get 63. That's a bit too much. Just a small amount of water, and then let's see, small amount of water, maybe 20 millilitres or so, and then about 40 millilitres of water. And 20 millilitres of water, 40 millilitres of olive oil. And even though oil and water don't really mix, we can at least get them to agree. Now you see the difference there? Oil and water shouldn't mix, but with a bit of stiff whisking, can actually get it to look like that. So we just pour it gently over like this. There we go. Whoa. Cool. And then we shall finish off with the sea salt. Now you don't want to break the crystals of the Malden sea salt, you just want to plop them on like so. And you can be quite generous because they are divine when you bite into one. That's nice, let's just get a little more going there. Lovely. Okay, no water in the oven. Straight in, 220. And in you go. Right, this is a straight ahead rosemary focaccia. Now you can add sun-dried tomatoes. Supermarkets do these beautiful tomatoes in oil in jars, and they're very soft and luscious. You can use olives, you can use garlic, you can use crushed potatoes. When you use garlic, I suggest that you cook the cloves whole in a frying pan first of all, so that they're not raw. And then you can push those into the dough, and you can use red onion. There's a whole load of things you can push into the dough, but this is the straight ahead basic rosemary focaccia recipe. So we're going to put that into the oven for about 20 minutes, because it's not a big thick lump of dough like a bloomer or the pot loaf. It's actually quite thin, so it won't take as long to cook. So I'm going to give it 10 minutes on this side, and then we'll flip it around after 10 minutes and give it another 10 minutes. And then we'll whip it out and we'll have a look. We'll wait for it to cool down and we shall open it up. Thank you very much. Okay, well, it's time for the big reveal. Kung Fu oven gloves at the ready. Oven off. Hallelujah. That's why that song was written. It was written for this bread. Look at that. There we go. That's about as good as it gets. Ooh. The smell coming off of this is absolutely fantastic. Right, now, what you need to do now is just let it sit there and cool down just for a few minutes, then take it out of the dish. Oh, it feels good. It feels very good. In fact, I'm going to get it out now. It just needs a few minutes just to let the sting out, but here we go. Oh. And there we go. Look at that. Moment of truth. Here comes the focaccia. I like to cut it into cubes, but we'll just ping through the first section. Lovely, lovely. Oh, it's really soft. Oh yes, that's beautiful and foamy. Oh, it smells amazing. You smell that? Mm. Wow. Oh yes, it's so light. Look at this, springing back. Absolutely beautiful. You can cut it into little cubes. The bottom, beautifully done with the little bits of sea salt stuck on the bottom. The crumb with the chopped fine chopped rosemary all the way through it, smelling absolutely divine and perfumey. And there we go, there's your focaccia. You can customise it with, as I said before, sun-dried tomatoes and garlic and olives and onions and all kinds of stuff you put in it. But that's your basic recipe. Hope you enjoy it. The next thing up is going to be a little seasonal thing, which will be hot cross buns, because it's coming up to Good Friday. When it's Good Friday, what, 6 days time, so we'll get hot cross buns done. I made a load of those last year and they were fantastic, so I'll do exactly the same recipe. See you on the next one.